So have you ever started a project, like super excited about it, and then like later on it just fizzles out?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're not alone.
Not at all.
Let's do a deep dive into why we struggle to actually follow through on things. And more importantly, what can we do about it?
Right.
You shared some excerpts from Finish What You Start by Peter Hollins.
Yeah.
And it seems like this book is like jam-packed with advice on self-discipline,
Absolutely.
like reaching goals and all that stuff.
What I found really fascinating was how the book uses this analogy of a Japanese anime robot, like Voltron, to kind of explain follow-through.
Okay, so how does that work?
Yeah.
So is it like each part of the robot has like a different job to do?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it breaks follow-through down into like 4 components.
Yeah.
You've got focus, self-discipline, action, and persistence.
Got it.
And each one is really important. Just like a robot needs all of its parts to function.
Right. So focus would be like the head of the robot, keeping everything on track, making sure the actions are actually aligned with the goal.
Spot on. And then you have self-discipline as like the spine. It's the strength to keep going, even when it's tough.
Okay. Action would be like the hands and feet
exactly
of the robot actually getting stuff done.
Exactly. And then finally, persistence is like the heart, the unwavering commitment to see things through no matter what obstacles pop up.
Persistence is a big one.
It is.
For sure.
Yeah.
But, even with all the right, quote unquote, parts in place, following through can be so hard.
Oh, for sure.
And the book talks about 2 main culprits, inhibiting tactics and psychological roadblocks.
Yeah.
What exactly are inhibiting tactics?
These are kind of like sneaky ways we sabotage ourselves without even realizing it. Like setting goals that are way too vague. Instead of saying like, I want to be healthier. Yeah. Maybe you say, I want to run a 5K in 3 months.
Okay, so that's like the difference between I want to write a novel and I want to write 500 words every day.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's like having that concrete plan instead of just big scary ideas.
Exactly. And then there's also like procrastination, distractions, poor time management. These are all inhibiting tactics too.
Yeah. And the psychological roadblocks, I think those are even trickier.
They are, yeah.
Like they're hidden deep down.
Yeah, they could be just straight up laziness or like a fear of what others will think or perfectionism that makes you feel like nothing's ever good enough. Yeah. Even just not being aware of like your own patterns. And pitfalls can be a roadblock.
The book opens with this story about Esther, who wants to start a baking business. She's doing all this research. And she's planning everything out perfectly. Like, but then nothing.
Nothing happens.
So she gets stuck.
Right. It's a classic example of what the book calls analysis paralysis. She's spending so much time getting ready that she never actually starts doing. It's like she's afraid to mess up her perfect plan.
Right. And that's such a common thing.
It is.
That happens.
Yeah.
Speaking of getting stuck, what does this story tell us about turning dreams into reality? Yeah. Like, what can we learn from Esther's experience so we don't fall into that same trap?
I think one key takeaway is like knowing when planning turns into procrastination. It's about finding that balance between preparing and taking action. Because like you can plan all you want, but at some point you got to start doing it.
You just have to jump in, right?
You do.
Yeah. And it's all about motivation too, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's like the fuel that keeps us going.
The book talks about like 2 kinds of motivation, external and internal. External motivators are things like having an accountability partner, deadlines that you have to meet, even like the fear of disappointing someone.
Okay, so an external motivator could be like, if I don't finish this project, my boss will be upset.
Exactly. While those can work, they don't always last.
Right.
It's more sustainable to kind of tap into internal motivators, like what truly matters to you.
That makes sense. Yeah. If it's something that aligns with your values or your bigger goals, it's going to be way more powerful than just, outside pressure.
The book suggests asking yourself specific questions to uncover your internal motivators. Like, how will your life change for the better if you achieve this goal?
Yeah.
What impact will it have on the people you care about?
Okay, so we've got my robot parts ready.
Right.
I've found my motivation.
Yeah.
Now what?
Now you just got to keep that momentum going.
Okay.
And speaking of making things easier, the book talks about creating systems.
Okay.
Think of it like setting up daily routines and structures that kind of make it easier to follow through.
Okay.
You're essentially like streamlining your efforts.
Okay.
And taking some of that pressure off of willpower.
So instead of constantly trying to decide what to do next, you have this framework in place that guides your actions.
The book even shares this case study about Ned, an entrepreneur, who was like totally overwhelmed after launching his business. And his solution was to implement daily systems.
Got it.
He basically created this structured routine that took away a lot of the decision fatigue.
So it sounds like he was trying to do everything at once.
It was, yeah.
And just burning himself out.
Right. But his system helped him organize his tasks and manage his time more effectively.
Okay. So systems are about like the how-to, but then there's also the how you think, right?
Exactly.
The book talks about the importance of mindset.
Yes, your mindset can absolutely make or break your follow-through.
Okay.
The book highlights a few key ones that can be really helpful. The first is believing that what you're doing is worthwhile, even when it's hard.
Okay.
You know, you need to constantly remind yourself, why are you doing this in the first place? Yeah.
And sometimes being okay with being uncomfortable. Right. Growth doesn't always feel good.
It doesn't.
Right.
No, it's about embracing those challenges and knowing that discomfort is often a sign that you're stretching and stepping outside your comfort zone.
So don't run from the hard stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. And then there's this idea of allow learning. It's about seeing follow through as a chance to learn and grow no matter what the outcome is.
So even if I don't achieve the exact goal, I can still learn something valuable from the experience.
It's about shifting your perspective from fearing failure to seeing it as feedback.
Okay, that's a really interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
So we've got systems and the right mindset, but then there's
procrastination.
The
procrastination monster.
Yeah. I feel like everybody struggles with this.
At some level.
Right.
Yeah.
The book dives into like the science behind it.
It does, yeah.
Right. Like, why is it so hard to do the things that we know we should be doing?
Well, the book talks about this thing called time inconsistency.
Okay.
It's basically the battle between our present self, who wants instant gratification, and our future self, who wants those long-term rewards.
So my present self wants to watch another episode of my favorite show, but my future self knows I need to finish this work project.
It's a tough battle.
Yes, it is.
But the book has this clever technique called temptation bundling.
Okay.
Where you combine something that you enjoy with the task you've been putting off.
Okay.
So maybe you only allow yourself to watch that show while you're folding laundry. You're kind of linking something you like with something you've been avoiding.
That's pretty genius, actually.
It is, yeah.
Tell me more about breaking things down into smaller steps. I know that's a classic productivity tip. But how does the book approach it?
The book uses this analogy of building a wall. Imagine trying to move these giant boulders. It feels impossible. But what if you're using pebbles instead?
Okay.
It's about breaking down those intimidating tasks into smaller, more manageable steps.
Yeah. And I bet that can help with building momentum too.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Like once you start seeing yourself making progress, even if it's just those little steps, it makes it easier.
It does. Once you get the ball rolling, it's easier to keep it moving.
Okay, let's talk about creating this no distraction zone, which is this concept that the book dives into.
It does, yeah.
It's basically about optimizing your environment so you can actually focus.
It's about minimizing those pesky distractions that can totally derail our best intentions.
All right.
And the book says, like, one of the best things you can do is to make it easy to do the right thing and difficult to do the wrong thing.
Okay, like putting my phone in another room while I'm working.
Exactly.
So I'm not tempted to check it every 5 minutes.
Exactly. Or using website blockers to prevent you from going down that social media rabbit hole.
Right.
Another thing the book emphasizes is single tasking. Ditching the myth of multitasking and focusing on one thing at a time.
It's like your brain is trying to do too many things at once, and it just ends up feeling fried.
And that leads to what the book calls attention residue.
Okay.
That kind of like leftover brain fog
Got it.
from switching between tasks.
So by focusing on one thing at a time, you can actually get more done and avoid that mental clutter.
Exactly. It's about giving your full attention to the task at hand and creating those conditions that allow you to get into like that flow state, that state of deep focus and immersion.
Okay, now all of this sounds great, but the book also talks about these potential pitfalls that we might encounter on the path to better follow through.
Right.
So what are those?
Well, one of the biggest ones is the false hope syndrome.
Okay.
Have you ever set a goal that was just so unrealistic?
Oh, yeah.
You knew deep down.
I'm the queen of setting unrealistic expectations.
Well, that's the false hope syndrome in action. Yeah. It's like setting yourself up for disappointment.
Right.
It's about recognizing your limitation.
Yeah.
And setting goals that are challenging but still achievable.
So instead of aiming for perfection, maybe it's better to just focus on progress.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then there's the danger of overthinking.
Oh, yeah. I know that one all too well.
Yeah.
It's like spending so much time planning and researching that you never actually take action.
It's like constantly spinning your wheels, but never actually putting the car in gear.
Yeah.
It can lead to feeling overwhelmed and like you're not making any progress.
So sometimes the best thing to do is just to start.
You got it.
Even if it's not perfect.
Exactly.
Okay.
Action is often the best antidote to overthinking.
Okay. Well, I'm definitely guilty of that one. It happens. So are there any other pitfalls we should watch out for?
Well, there's worry. You know, that tendency to focus on all the things that could go wrong.
So it's like anticipating rain and never enjoying the sunshine.
Exactly. The book emphasizes that while it's important to be aware of potential challenges, it's also super important to focus on what you can control, which is your actions and your efforts right now in the present moment.
So don't get caught up in those what ifs.
Right.
Focus on what you can do today.
Exactly. Yeah. And finally, the book highlights the importance of knowing yourself.
Okay.
Understanding your own unique productivity patterns.
Okay.
What motivates you. What environment helps you thrive.
Okay.
What strategies actually work for you.
Yeah. That's such a good point.
Because what works for one person might not work for another.
It's like there's no one-size-fits-all approach to productivity.
It's about being honest with yourself about your strengths and weaknesses so that you can leverage those strengths and come up with strategies to deal with those areas where you might struggle.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm really curious about the last chapter.
Okay.
The book talks about creating daily systems for success, right?
Yeah. It's about having systems in place to help kind of streamline your efforts, reduce your reliance on willpower, and make it easier to stay on track toward your goals.
Okay.
And the book uses that example of Ned, the entrepreneur we talked about earlier, to kind of illustrate how powerful systems can be.
Right. He was initially struggling to manage his workload after starting his own business. It was just too much.
Yeah, it was just too much for him to handle.
Oh, right.
And his solution was to implement these daily systems that helped him organize his tasks, manage his time more effectively, and minimize distractions.
So by creating that structure, he was able to kind of regain control of his time and energy.
Exactly. And the book stresses that systems are different from goals.
Okay, how so?
Goals are more like one-off accomplishments.
Okay.
You reach them and then you're done. Okay. Systems, on the other hand, are about consistency.
Okay.
They're about those habits and routines that help you succeed in the long term.
So my goal might be to write a book.
Yeah.
But my system would be the things I do regularly to make that happen. Like writing a certain number of words every day or setting aside a specific time for writing each week.
Exactly. And the book highlights several key elements of effective systems, like keeping a scoreboard.
Okay, what's that?
It's all about like tracking your progress and celebrating those wins.
Okay.
Both big and small.
So could it be as simple as
it could.
Like checking things off a to-do list?
It could.
Okay.
Or making like a chart to track my progress.
Okay.
Right. The key is to find what works for you and create a system that helps you stay motivated.
Okay, so what about time management?
Time management is huge.
Yeah.
The book talks about creating a routine for your work, setting clear boundaries, minimizing distractions, and really being mindful of how you spend your time.
So it's about making sure you're spending your time on the things that matter most.
Exactly.
Okay.
The book also talks about something called transaction costs.
Okay.
It refers to the cost, whether it's monetary, emotional, or physical, associated with doing a particular thing.
Okay, so like the cost of getting yourself to the gym.
Exactly.
Or the cost of, spending an hour on social media.
Right. And the book says we can actually manipulate these costs to make it easier to stick to good habits and avoid those temptations that might derail our progress.
Okay, so if I want to spend less time on social media, I might increase the quote-unquote cost by like putting my phone in another room or using a website blocker. And to make it easier to exercise, maybe I decrease the cost by laying out my workout clothes the night before or finding a workout buddy to hold me accountable.
It's about being strategic and setting yourself up for success.
Okay.
The book also talks about gathering all the information and resources that you need for a project before you get started.
Okay.
That way you can kind of like work without interruption.
So it's like front-loading the work.
Exactly. Right. And keep that momentum going.
So you can just like flow through it more easily.
It also suggests like creating a detailed plan.
Okay.
Identify potential obstacles.
Okay.
Assign tasks. Set deadlines.
Okay.
And even create a follow-up plan.
So it's all about being prepared and having that roadmap to follow.
Right.
Okay, I love how practical this book is.
It is,
It's not just about these like abstract concepts.
Right.
It gives you these concrete strategies to use.
Exactly. And it also reminds you,
that it's not about being perfect.
Okay.
You don't have to be some kind of like productivity robot.
Right.
It's about finding what works for you. In creating a system that fits your needs and preferences.
So it's about creating a system that fits your life, not trying to force yourself into a mold that doesn't work for you.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's about recognizing that you don't have to do everything perfectly.
Right.
Sometimes good enough is enough to move forward.
And that reminds me of the 40-70 rule, what we talked about earlier. It's about taking action when you have enough information, but not waiting for everything to be perfect. So it's about finding that sweet spot between gathering information and taking decisive action.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay. This is all making a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So systems help us create that structure and consistency. But finish what you start. Also talks about this idea of opportunity cost.
Right.
Which seems pretty important.
Yeah, it's about understanding that like every choice we make means saying no to something else.
Okay.
So, if your goal is to finish that online course you started, but you also really want to go out with friends every weekend, but something has to give.
Right. So like the Friday night out with friends might be an opportunity cost.
It could be.
If it's preventing me from, working on my side project that I'm passionate about.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the book gives us two main approaches to dealing with this. One is to boost your motivation.
Okay.
If you're truly excited about your goal. Those sacrifices will feel less difficult.
Right. So that goes back to really connecting with my why, like we talked about before.
Yeah.
If I know why something matters to me, I'm more willing to make those trade-offs.
Exactly. The other approach is to make those sacrifices smaller.
Okay.
So maybe instead of going out every Friday, it's every other Friday.
Okay.
Or instead of, an expensive dinner, it's meeting friends for coffee.
So you're still enjoying yourself, but it's not completely derailing your progress.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. Finding ways to make those sacrifices, less painful.
So once you've got your motivation.
Okay, so once I've got my motivation and I've figured out the opportunity costs, how do I stay on track?
Right.
I feel like motivation can be fleeting.
Motivation can definitely be fleeting.
Right. It's like you're all excited in the beginning and then 2 weeks later it's like, I don't know about this anymore.
The book talks about the power of cues to keep our motivation strong. These are basically like reminders that we can use to stay focused.
Got it.
Think of it like strategically placing things in your environment to kind of nudge you in the right direction.
So like visual cues.
Yes. Visual cues can be really effective.
Yeah, I've heard that those...
The book actually mentions this study where people who had like a visual reminder of their goal, they used an elephant statue in this case, were more likely to follow through.
So it's like having a little cheerleader in the room. But it's an elephant?
But it's an elephant.
I love it.
Yeah.
What are some other examples of cues?
It doesn't have to be an elephant, of course.
Right, of course.
But it could be like a vision board with images that represent your goals. It could be a motivational quote on your desk, or even just like a sticky note with your goal written on it.
Yeah.
The point is to have these reminders in your environment that kind of help you stay focused on what you're working towards.
What about creating a manifesto for myself?
Oh, yeah.
I remember reading something about that.
The book suggests creating like a set of rules or a personal manifesto to guide your actions and decisions.
Got it.
It kind of takes the guesswork out of things. And that can be a huge help with following through.
Because when you have those rules in place,
you
don't have to constantly rely on willpower.
You don't.
It's like the decision is already made.
Exactly. It frees up mental energy and helps you stay consistent.
So if we think about...
The book emphasizes that these rules should be like personal to you, aligned with your values and goals. And it gives some really helpful example, like committing to completing 2 tasks on your to-do list every day that are related to your main goal. Or maybe you decide to only focus on like 3 important tasks each day.
It's about simplifying things and making it easier to stay on track.
Exactly.
Okay, so if we think about the mindset that we need for success, how does the book...
The book talks about 4 key mindsets that can make a huge difference. The first is believing that what you're doing is worthwhile, even when it's tough. You know it's about connecting with that deeper meaning behind your goal, knowing why it matters to you.
So it's about reminding yourself of the bigger picture, even when you're feeling frustrated or discouraged.
Exactly. The second mindset is about being comfortable with discomfort.
Got it.
You know, it's about embracing the challenges that come with growth. Because let's face it, stepping outside your comfort zone isn't always fun.
I think a lot of people avoid discomfort. But I think also if you're always looking for like the easy way out, you're probably not going to
grow as much. Yeah. And that discomfort is often a sign that you're learning and pushing yourself. And then there's the mindset of allow learning. It's about seeing every experience, whether you achieve your goal or not, as an opportunity to learn and grow.
That's a really empowering perspective. It's like taking the pressure off of achieving like this perfect outcome.
Exactly. It's about focusing on the process and the lessons you're learning along the way. And finally, there's the de-stress mindset. It's about recognizing the impact stress has on our productivity. Like you can't run a marathon with a sprained ankle.
Right. So it's about prioritizing self-care.
Exactly.
Taking breaks, getting enough sleep, doing things that you enjoy.
Absolutely.
Those are all essential for maintaining focus and motivation.
Exactly.
Okay, let's talk about the procrastination monster.
Okay.
It seems like everybody struggles with this.
To some degree,
To some degree.
Yeah.
How does the book approach?
The book kind of dives into the science behind procrastination, explaining like why we often struggle to do the things we know we should do.
Right.
It talks about that time inconsistency.
Yeah.
We discussed earlier, the battle between our present self and our future self.
So the present self wants that instant gratification, and the future self is all about those long-term rewards.
Right.
Okay.
And this is where temptation bundling can be so effective. Linking something you enjoy with a task you've been putting off can make a huge difference.
So maybe you only allow yourself to watch your favorite show while you're working out.
Exactly.
Or listen to that podcast you love while you're cleaning the house.
Right.
I've actually started doing that, and it really works.
It does, yeah. The book also talks about breaking down those big, daunting tasks into smaller, more manageable steps.
Like that wall analogy you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to move a giant boulder, you focus on moving one pebble at a time.
Right.
Okay.
It makes the task feel less overwhelming.
Yeah.
And it also helps you build momentum.
So as you start checking those smaller steps off your list, you gain a sense of progress. And it makes it easier to keep going.
Exactly.
Okay. So it's about finding ways to make those big, scary tasks feel less intimidating.
Exactly.
Okay.
And another tactic the book mentions is considering the risks of not taking action.
Okay.
So it's about shifting your focus from what you might lose by trying to, what you'll definitely lose by staying stuck.
So instead of focusing on like all the things that could go wrong, if I start that business, maybe I should think about the fact that I'll never achieve my dream if I don't even try.
It's about using a little productive paranoia to push yourself out of your comfort zone.
Okay, so once you've taken that first step, it becomes easier to keep moving forward.
It does, yeah.
Okay. Speaking of things that can hold us back, let's talk about distractions.
Okay.
The book dedicates a whole chapter to creating this no distraction zone.
Right. It's about optimizing your environment.
Okay, so what are some practical tips for minimizing distractions?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm constantly bombarded by them.
The book talks about the importance of making it easy to do the right thing and difficult to do the wrong thing.
Okay. Like putting my phone in another room while I'm working, so I'm not tempted to check it every 5 minutes.
Right. Or using website blockers to prevent yourself from, mindlessly scrolling through social media.
Okay, the book also emphasizes the importance of single tasking.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We talked about that earlier. It's about focusing on one thing at a time and avoiding that attention residue.
Okay.
Give your full attention to the task at hand, and you'll be amazed at how much more you can accomplish.
Okay, now this might sound a little counterintuitive.
It might, yeah.
But the book also suggests batching your distractions. Batching distractions.
Yes.
What does that mean?
It means setting aside specific time blocks for those less productive activities like checking social media or browsing the internet.
Got it.
Yeah.
That way you're not constantly interrupting your workflow with those tempting distractions.
Okay. So I'm guessing the idea is that if you know you have a designated time for those activities, it makes it easier to resist them during your focused work periods.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
It's about creating boundaries and controlling those distractions instead of letting them control you.
Right.
The book also suggests creating a don't-do list.
A don't-do list?
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that.
It's basically a list of tasks that you consciously choose not to do.
Okay.
Things that aren't moving you closer to your goals, it kind of frees up time and energy.
So it's about being selective and focusing on the tasks that will have the biggest impact.
Oh, exactly.
It's about recognizing that not all tasks are created equal and prioritizing those that align with your goals and values.
So, for example, you might put things on your don't-do list that are priorities, but that you can't do anything about right now.
Right.
Because you're waiting on somebody else.
Exactly.
Or maybe there are tasks that you could delegate or outsource.
Exactly.
Or tasks.
Or the things that are just a waste of time and energy, but busy work that keeps you occupied, but doesn't actually move you forward.
Okay, so it's about being intentional with how you spend your time and energy and making sure you're focusing on the things that will actually make a difference.
Now all this talk.
About systems and productivity might feel a little overwhelming for some people.
Well, it could be.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, I need a system to manage my systems.
Right.
Yeah.
The book emphasizes that it's not about striving for perfection or becoming some kind of productivity robot. Right. It's about finding what works for you and creating a system that supports your unique needs and preferences.
So it's about creating a system that fits your life.
Yeah.
Not trying to force yourself into a mold that doesn't work for you.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that you don't have to do everything perfectly.
Right.
Sometimes good enough is enough to move forward.
And that reminds me of the 40-70 rule we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
It's about taking action.
Yeah.
When you have enough information, but not waiting for everything to be perfect.
Exactly.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between gathering information and taking decisive action.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
How does the book address the importance of rest and relaxation?
Oh, yeah.
Because it seems like constantly pushing ourselves to be productive can actually backfire.
It can. Right. The book stresses that constantly being up on can lead to burnout and actually hinder our productivity.
So taking breaks, getting enough sleep, and doing things that allow us to unwind are actually essential for our productivity as a long run.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The book also talks about the need to disconnect from everything.
Okay.
Sometimes. Just let our minds wander.
Okay.
You know? It's often during those times of rest and relaxation that we have our most creative insights and breakthroughs.
So giving our brains a break can actually make us more productive in the long run.
It's about finding that balance between work and rest and recognizing that both are essential for our well-being and our success.
Okay, we've talked a lot about strategies for improving our follow-through.
Right.
But what about those pitfalls that we might encounter along the way?
Right.
What are some common mistakes people make?
The book highlights several potential pitfalls, starting with the false hope syndrome, which we talked about earlier.
Right.
It's about setting unrealistic expectations, which often leads to disappointment and giving up when we inevitably fall short.
So it's about being realistic.
It is,
with our goals and understanding our limitations.
Oh, exactly.
Okay, and then there's overthinking.
Overthinking, the classic.
Yeah, I know that one all too well.
It can paralyze us.
It's like constantly spinning your wheels.
Exactly.
But never putting the car in gear.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know from personal experience that overthinking can lead to a lot of wasted time and energy.
Exactly. It's about recognizing when you're stuck in that overthinking loop.
Okay.
And finding ways to break free.
Right. So sometimes the best way to figure something out is to just start doing it.
Just start doing it.
You'll learn more from taking action than you ever will from just sitting there thinking about it.
Exactly.
Okay. So it's about trusting yourself.
Yeah.
And taking that leap of faith. Okay. Are there any other pitfalls we should be aware of?
The book talks about the danger of worry.
Okay.
That tendency to fixate on negative scenarios and potential problems.
So it's like that saying, worrying is like paying interest on a debt you may never owe.
Exactly. And while it's important to be aware of potential challenges, it's equally important to focus on what you can control, which is your actions, effort in the present moment.
So don't get bogged down in those what ifs.
Exactly.
Focus on what you can do today.
Right.
Okay.
And finally, the book emphasizes the importance of knowing yourself, understanding your own unique productivity patterns. What motivates you, what environment you thrive in, what strategies actually work for you.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Because what works for one person might not work for another.
Like there's no one-size-fits-all approach to productivity.
It's about being honest with yourself, about your strengths and weaknesses.
Okay.
So you can leverage those strengths and come up with strategies to address those areas where you might struggle.
Okay, in the final chapter, the book talks about creating daily systems for success.
It argues that having these systems in place can streamline your efforts,
Okay.
Reduce your reliance on willpower.
Yeah.
And make it easier to stay on track toward your goals.
Okay.
It uses the example of Ned, the entrepreneur we talked about earlier,
right.
to illustrate how powerful systems can be.
Right. He was initially overwhelmed by the demands of his new business.
Yeah.
But he found a solution by creating a system that helped him manage his time more effectively.
Exactly.
And stay focused.
And the book emphasizes that systems are different from goals.
Okay. How so?
Well, goals are about one-off accomplishment.
Yeah.
But systems are about consistency. Okay. They're about those habits and routines that help you succeed in the long run.
So my goal might be to write. Okay, so we've covered like a ton of great strategies from finish what you start.
We have.
But before we wrap up, I want to go back to the beginning. Peter Hollins, the author.
Right.
He shares this personal story.
He does.
And I think it perfectly sets the stage for the whole book.
Yeah, he talks about trying to build a wooden canoe.
Yeah.
And it definitely wasn't as easy as he thought it would be.
Yeah, it sounds like he started off all gung-ho.
He did.
But then, he describes how the first week went great.
Yeah.
Second week was okay. But by the third week, he was pretty much over it.
Yeah, he was done.
He even calls the half-finished canoe a symbol of his laziness.
I love that.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
I mean, it sat in his garage.
It did.
For 2 summers before he finally finished it.
Right.
And the story is just so relatable.
It is.
Because I bet we all have those unfinished projects.
I got plenty.
Right.
Yeah.
Lurking somewhere. The things that we started with, best of intentions, but just didn't follow through on.
Right.
I have a pile of knitting projects that I swore I'd finish someday.
Someday.
Right.
Yeah.
What I found fascinating was how he actually used this canoe building experience to illustrate one of the key techniques in the book, temptation bundling.
Right.
So he realized that if he could make that not so fun part of carving the canoe more enjoyable, he'd be way more likely.
Way more likely
to stick with it.
Yeah.
So did he bribe himself with ice cream for every inch of wood he carved?
So his solution was actually pretty simple.
Okay.
He decided to only allow himself to listen to his favorite albums.
Okay.
The ones he rarely had time for while he was working on the canoe.
Oh, that's so smart.
Yeah.
It's like he hacked his own brain by connecting something he really enjoyed with something he'd been avoiding.
And it totally worked.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
By pairing the pleasure of listening to his favorite music with the task of, canoe carving.
Right.
He was able to overcome that resistance and finally finish the project.
Exactly.
It's a great example of how we can work with our own psychology instead of fighting against it.
Right.
Instead of just relying on willpower.
Yeah.
We can make those difficult tasks more appealing.
Right.
And the beauty of temptation bundling is that it can apply to so many different areas of life.
Yeah.
We've talked about a few examples already.
Right.
But think about your own goals. What's something you've been putting off that you could pair with an activity you enjoy?
It's like that saying.
Yeah.
Work smarter, not harder.
Okay. So we've covered so much in this deep dive into finish what you start.
Yeah.
You shared some incredible insights.
Thank you.
And I feel like I have a whole new arsenal of tools to tackle my goals.
Yeah.
But here's the big question for you listening. What are you going to do with this information?
Yeah, the book's like a toolbox.
Okay.
But it's up to you to use those tools.
Think about a goal you've been putting off.
Yeah.
Even if it's a small one. Pick one technique from the book and try it out. Track your progress. Celebrate those wins.
Right.
And most importantly, be patient with yourself.
Be patient.
Remember, follow through is a journey.
It is.
Right.
And to quote Peter Hollins, the only way to truly fail is to give up before you've even begun.
So get out there and start building your own canoe.
Building your canoe.